a book launch that wasn't an academic event, that captured the spirit of the Non-stop Picket, that was an opportunity for people who had been part of the Non-stop Picket or whose families had been part of the Non-stop Picket to come together to celebrate what we achieved over those 4 years and the 12 years that the City of London Anti-Apartheid Group campaigned against apartheid in South Africa and racism in Britain. So it felt really appropriate that we should gather here on the pavement outside the South African Embassy, where we stood for nearly 4 years demanding the unconditional release of Nelson Mandela and all political prisoners in South Africa. Nearly 4 years, from the 19th of April 1986 until a few days after Mandela was released in February 1990. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for that 4 years. Lots of us were just ordinary teenagers doing extraordinary things, but many of us were new to politics when we came here. But we know that the Non-stop Picket and that 4 years of intense campaigning, the intense comradeship that we forged on this pavement was absolutely foundational in shaping a whole generation of political activists who continue to campaign against injustice in the world to this day. And we wanted to celebrate our collective achievement in doing that.
We have to take up the struggle here on behalf of black people in South Africa, against Thatcher, against Reagan, against the racists.
Carol said it was the most important, formative political experience of my life. And I see it as a political experience, not as a personal one. I learnt a lot, and I had the opportunity to mix with some amazing people. The City Group experience is a starting point rather than an end point. The next movement will incorporate that knowledge and that experience. It is important to pass it on, and I am glad that it is being passed on. Viva Carol! Viva!
Viva! You have to understand the situation we were in. 3.3 million people were unemployed, and 1.24 million of those people were young people aged 16 to 24. So it's not surprising that thousands of young people over the time of the 4-year non-stop picket joined the picket, learned the lessons of the picket and taught us something about the reality of their lives and their experiences.
My dad was the longest serving white political prisoner in South Africa, stayed true to his principles, and he would be here saying, we need to end capitalism. Yes. Apartheid will not die until we end capitalism and its highest stage, imperialism, and we cannot fight climate change without opposing capitalism. That's my dad. People stood in 4-hour stints, sometimes more, overnight, all day long, in the rain, in the snow. The first winter of the picket was the coldest in 40 years. When the comrades got a brazier to light a fire to warm up, the police called the fire brigade to put it out. And what happened? They refused to put it out. Just incredible stories of defiance, but principled defiance. Defiance in solidarity, in unity, in community. And that is what we really hope comes out from our book.
generation of anti-apartheid campaigning in Britain in the 1980s. You couldn't move around central London without seeing the Non-stop Picket. Because we were there 24 hours a day, we were a constant irritation to the embassy of the opposition to apartheid internationally, but we were also a constant inspiration to people in London and around the world who wanted to do something about apartheid. We made people's involvement in anti-apartheid campaigning possible by the welcoming and open political culture that we created. We've made sure that the Non-stop Picket can't be forgotten. It can't be forgotten in Britain, and it can't be forgotten in South Africa. Over the last few months, we've made arrangements, and all of the papers from the Citigroup office have now been transferred to the archive at the Bishopsgate Institute near Liverpool Street. That's an open access public archive that anyone can access.
We know that this activism is relevant today. And finally, I would like to celebrate with you, Helen and Gavin, because you've told the truth about the struggle in South Africa and the demand for democratic rights in Britain, and telling the truth is our way.
That was a part of the beginning of my political education about the perils of capitalism, the collective guilt that we have in the West for what we are still doing to the world.
It was a brilliant experience. I was one of those young generation, age in my early 20s. It has moved me forward because at least it is a lesson for the young people. Don't give it a fight.
And I have memories of standing in the pouring rain on my own for 2 hours on a Thursday morning just praying that somebody would turn up at 11:30 so I could go and collect him from preschool. And they always did. Somebody always turned up. And that was what was incredible. Even when you were down to one person for 2 hours or 3 hours, somebody else always turned up. That picket never stopped. Even in the hurricane, the picket didn't stop. It went on and on and on. And there were so many memories, so many memories. I've got hundreds of pictures, I'm sure, somewhere at home. I just don't know where they are. It was a real education, and it still is an education, and I hope it will be an education for the future. And yes, that's all I can say.
It's an honour for me to be here this evening with people that I was arrested with, like Errol here, who I haven't seen in, like, what, nearly 30 years probably? When was it? Like 30 years ago. Yeah. I mean, you know, it's an honour to be with people that I was with then and with whom we built... We kind of very quickly came to a working understanding of what solidarity was and how to make our struggle against apartheid relate to the struggle against racism in Britain and the struggle against imperialism around the world.
I'd like to thank Gavin and Helen for the book that they've written, and because it is important what we did, and I don't want people to forget. I don't want people to forget David Kitson. I think that would be terrible. Not only must they not forget what he did and all that time in jail, I don't want them to forget how he was treated. And I don't want people to forget that there were 2 apartheid spies who were running the London ANC.
Going back to what Helen and Gavin have done in writing that book, which is fantastic. It is fantastic, but it's only fantastic if it is not a history. If it's not like, oh my God, didn't we have a good time on the picket in the 1980s? Wasn't it brilliant? Didn't we take on the police? Didn't we do this? Didn't we do that? Oh my God, it was the best time of my life. That does not matter, comrades. What matters is the lessons in the book, as Gavin and others have said, non-sectarianism, democracy, but also an understanding of imperialism, of capitalism. It is also what I truly and utterly believe, and that comes from the picket, which I started, well, I was there on the first day, I was young, I was foolish, I was an arse, but I learned, and I can't say I grew, but I really got to understand what my country was really about.
It has stayed with me all of my life. It is something that runs through me without even thought. It is something that I do every day. The personal is political. Thank you.
When we left South Africa, we had known for roughly a year with one of us or the other on the run for most of the time in our last year in South Africa. We had known that the crunch would come. And when we finally left, we literally had the security dogs snapping at our heels. Both of us come from very close-knit families. And if we're talking outright politics, and it must be said that every time people from here, people from home saw what was happening here, it was a shot in the arm for them. Make no bones about it. When you are down on your knees in the townships and you see other people carrying placards for you, non-stop, in the cold, in the snow, in the rain, then there is nothing like it. And the one thing that we could do is send that message back in person. Been there, seen it done. Comrades, they are with us.
When we came here as relatively lonely and isolated comrades and activists from South Africa, we were in the very, very fortunate position of being welcomed into a new family. And that family was Citigroup. And to that family, we have to owe our thanks. So thank you, Citigroup.
I was a teacher at an all-boys secondary school in Islington, and it was pretty tough. And I started to talk to the pupils about Nelson Mandela and apartheid. And the reaction was one of puzzled fury. And when I told them that there were 19 black people to one white person in South Africa, and yet there was an apartheid regime, they were furious.
And being a child at this time, this made you realise that just battling through a few police, who obviously in those days didn't wear any riot gear, and putting some flowers on the embassy was such a small task compared to the children who are throwing stones and rocks and fighting for their rights in South Africa.
I want to say internationalism, class consciousness and solidarity. And I want to say, huge number of people committing to going to meetings every Friday night. Yeah. And I want to say, no emails, no mobile phones to organise with, and yet people made it on time to their picket shift. And if they weren't there, when I arrived on the picket, I was taught, Norma Kitson says, if you don't arrive, we assume you've been arrested, so you have to be on time. Thank you. Viva Citigroup! International solidarity. Venceremos.
And a non-stop picket of the embassy. Till the border regime is stop, and we'll do all we can. So lend a helping hand. Non-stop again. Oh, non-stop Mandela. You are leader in your chosen home. Oh, non-stop Mandela. You are a force. You are a force. What's going on? We are here now. We are here till Mandela is free. And a non-stop picket of the embassy. Till the border regime is stop, and we'll do all we can. So let the helping hand. Holy Tata, Holy Tata Mandela. The freedom fighters are inspired by you. Holy Tata Mandela, you are a living hero to the youth. We are here now till Mandela's free, and a non-stop picket of the embassy. And we call on each other.